known to us Pacific Islanders, and, you know, a little bit of that. Yeah?
Well, just very briefly, if I can. I knew a lot about some of the Pacific Islands even when I was quite young, because my mother's brother was Pastor Eric Bohm. And he was, of course, for many years was a missionary in Papua New Guinea, and finally the president of the, what was it, Bismarck Solomons Union Mission. And they used to come home on furlough, they would stay with us, and he would show us these, what do they call? Movies, Super 8 movies or something. Anyway, little movies and pictures, and he would bring us grass skirts and, and all sorts of things. So I had that great interest in the islands, you know, from a very young age. I'll skip over quite a few years. Later on, I took nursing training, and I wanted to be a missionary nurse, and I really wanted to go to Africa, because I'd read Dr. Paul White's books. I don't know if any have read the Jungle Story books, and I actually got called to go to work in East Africa, and I worked in hospitals in Uganda and in Kenya, and I was over there for about 12 years. Then I came back to Australia, worked at the SAN for a little while, and then I got called to go to PNG, Papua New Guinea. I worked at Sopaz Hospital for 7 years. Some of that time I was the director of nursing, sometimes I was the principal of the nursing school, sometimes I did both at one time. Fortunately, only for a few months. But of course, when you were singing How Great Thou Art, it took me back to Sopaz, because Friday nights after Vespers, we used to go around and sing to the patients, and I clearly remember singing, "Oh Papa God, you number one." I wished you'd sung it that way this morning. But so then I came back and I worked at the SAN in the maternity for many more years until I retired. So I was still single at that time. And, well, I don't... How come I'm with him? Well, Ray was married to my older sister, Ruth, as some of you who knew them back then know.
I knew her first when she was a very cheeky little 14-year-old.
But then, in 1998, I actually retired, and I was living in my home in Mount Karingai, and of course, in 2003, January, very sadly, Ruth passed away. And because we knew each other very well, we'd known each other for more than 50 years, and about nearly 3 years later, he said to me, "You know, we're getting old, we know each other well, we're good friends, why don't we get old together?" So in 2006, in January, we got married. And then...
Still practicing being old.
But the next 2 years, we were at Fulton College because Ray was actually doing volunteer teaching there. He came home because something went wrong. Yeah, I needed new knees, and so we came back to Australia to get some new knees. But, so that's my story, and now we are living up in the retirement village in Kurrambong at Avondale, and we still keep pretty busy. We've been out to Auri doing layman schools there last year, 2013, 2009, we were there. Yeah. So we still keep in contact with the islands. Also, I've been back to Fulton again, and we may even have a look at the new Fulton a bit later this year. Anyway, I'll pass this over to Ray.
Thank you.
Well, I'm a sort of a Wantok because I was born in Fiji, and I grew up. I spent my first 15 years there. My father was in mission work, and I always planned that I would go back to the islands because I felt God had given me the privilege of growing up there. I knew the islands, it was my part of the world, and so far I have spent a little over 65 years of my life in the islands in various ways. When I graduated from college as a teacher, I could tell you a longer story on that, but I got married to Ruth, Lola's older sister. One of the first things that we had talked about when I started thinking she was a rather nice kind of girl was, have you ever thought of going to the islands as a mission worker? And she said, yes. She said, that's what I've thought about. And so we carried it out. We went first to the Cook Islands for 2 years, went back to Fiji then for 14 years, and then they moved me across to Papua New Guinea. I was there for 20 years. Then I went to the Solomons for 3 years. Then I retired, but since then I've done, I suppose, about 7 or 8 years back in the islands, various volunteer programs, and it's my part of the world, so we are Wantoks.
Thank you very much, Pastor and Mrs. Wilkinson. We're privileged to have heard your story today, and we just praise God and thank God for his leading in your life.